They're not taking your money. They're not stealing your car. But something far more valuable is being taken from you every single day, and most people don't even realize it. You wake up already tired. You scroll your phone and feel like you've run a marathon before noon. You walk into a room and leave feeling like something inside you got drained without a single word being said. That's not stress. That's not introversion. That's energy theft. And it's happening all the time. Not by accident, but by design. Because the world is full of people who've forgotten how to fill themselves, so they plug into you. They call it love. They call it friendship. They say, I just needed someone to talk to. But what they're really doing is tapping into your life force. Quietly, constantly. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse being helpful with being harvested. The truth is, most people don't want your presence. They want your power, the way you hold space, the way you absorb pain like a sponge, the way you make things better just by existing. That's what they're after. And every time you give it away without awareness, you lose a piece of yourself. Not in some poetic way, literally. Your nervous system tightens. Your thoughts get foggy. Your energy field thins. You start to feel invisible inside your own life. And it doesn't show up all at once. It's gradual. It's subtle. It feels like burnout, like overthinking, like emotional whiplash. But what you're really feeling is energetic bankruptcy. The result of giving, pleasing, fixing, and absorbing without ever checking your own balance. And here's the dangerous part. Energy vampires don't always look like enemies. Sometimes they look like family, like co-workers, like your best friend, and they don't always know they're doing it. Some people steal energy simply because no one taught them how to generate their own. So they learned how to survive by hooking into others. They feed off of your light, your time, your attention. And when they leave, you're the one left vibrating lower, wondering what just happened. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the way you feel after the phone call, the message, the meeting. Heavy, office depleted. And then you blame yourself. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I need more rest. Maybe I should meditate. Maybe you need to protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. We've all heard the phrase, time is money, but that's not true. Time can be wasted, money can be earned again. But energy is everything. It's your ability to show up in your life with clarity, focus, and strength. Without energy, love feels like a chore. Work feels like drowning. Even rest feels like guilt. And yet, most people are walking around in energetic debt, overspent, undercharged, and constantly leaking. Because no one ever taught us that energy is a form of currency. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every place you go, it's all a transaction. And if you're not aware of what you're paying and what you're receiving, you're going to go broke, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Think about the last time you gave your energy to something or someone that didn't return anything. Maybe it was an argument you didn't need to have, a favor you didn't really want to say yes to, a message you answered out of guilt, not desire. That was a withdrawal. And just like money, enough withdrawals without deposits will leave you empty. But here's what no one tells you. You are your own bank. You choose who gets access, and not everyone deserves a key. There are people in your life right now who treat your energy like a free refill station. They come empty, they leave full, and you're left wondering why you can't think straight. That's because energy moves before language. It's a silent exchange. And some people are masters at tapping in without your permission. They don't need to yell. They don't need to beg. All they need is access, a response, a little opening. That's all it takes. And if you haven't learned how to protect your emotional bandwidth, you'll keep giving it away and calling it kindness. You'll think you're being generous, when really you're being robbed. This is why protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's survival. Because your energy is what creates your reality. If it's fractured, your clarity is fractured. Your boundaries are blurry, your self-trust disappears. And eventually, you forget what it even feels like to be whole. But when you start treating your energy like the sacred resource it is, everything shifts. You stop reacting, you stop rescuing, you stop entertaining people who only show up to take. And slowly, you begin to build something stronger than protection: sovereignty. There's something they don't want you to know. The people who keep pulling on you, relying on you, guilt-tripping you into showing up even when you're running on empty. Here it is. You're their power source. Not because they chose you consciously, but because you allowed it. And that's hard to admit. Because the need to be needed feels good at first. It feels like connection, like love, like meaning. You become the rock, the go-to, the one they always call. You've got the answers, the calm, the listening ear. But over time, that role becomes a cage. You stop being a person. You become a utility. And the moment you try to step back, they say, "What's wrong with you? You've changed. You're being distant." Because the power dynamic only worked when you stayed plugged in. They weren't connecting to you. They were connecting to your function. And now that function is offline. That's why they panic. That's why they lash out. Because their comfort depended on your exhaustion. But here's the hardest part. You let it happen. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the line, you confused being loved with being useful. You thought if you could just be enough help, enough calm, enough support, they'd finally choose you. But all they really chose was the version of you that made their life easier. That's not love. That's dependency. And the more you give without checking the balance, the more invisible you become. Until one day, you're surrounded by people who don't even know who you are, because you trained them to only recognize the version of you that served them. And when you stop serving, they disappear. Let them. Because what you lose in people, you gain in power. And it's only when you unplug from their needs that you start to feel your own again. That's not selfish. That's the beginning of self-respect. And once you realize you've been performing usefulness in exchange for approval, the grief hits. Not just grief for the people who leave when you stop serving them, but grief for all the moments you abandoned yourself to be enough for someone else. You start to see how early it began. Maybe it was in childhood when being helpful earned you praise. Maybe it was in school when blending in kept you safe. Maybe it was in relationships where being accommodating made you lovable. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your worth was tied to what you could do, not who you were. So you became indispensable. The one who doesn't complain. The one who always picks up. The one who holds space for everyone but herself. But being indispensable is a trap. Because once people rely on you for their emotional stability, your needs become inconvenient. The moment you say, "I need space," it's perceived as a threat. The moment you say no, they hear rejection. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've interrupted their access to your energy. You became a subscription service for emotional support, auto-renewing every time someone needed something. And the worst part is, they don't even realize it. They've gotten so used to your yes, your availability, your willingness, that anything less than constant access feels like a betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's boundaries. And boundaries are not walls, they're not punishments. They are the edges of self-respect. They are declarations of worth. They are reminders that your energy is not up for unlimited distribution. And yet, most people fear setting boundaries because they've been trained to associate boundaries with conflict, rejection, or loss. But here's the truth. Boundaries don't push the right people away. They reveal who was only there for the open access. You start saying no to things you used to tolerate. You stop justifying your choices. You let the unanswered message be your answer. And suddenly, the energy shifts. The constant chaos begins to quiet. The noise softens. You feel lighter, more clear, more in control. And you realize something shocking. Peace isn't boring. Peace is revolutionary. Because in a world that profits from your burnout, peace is an act of rebellion. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's an act of compassion for yourself and for the relationships that are actually built on truth. Because when people know where you end and they begin, the connection becomes real, not manipulative, not codependent, real. And yes, it might get lonely for a while, because your boundaries will filter people, but let them. Let the filters work. Because what's left after the sorting is your real circle. The ones who don't drain you, the ones who don't guilt trip you, the ones who love you, not your service. This is where you begin to understand the hidden power of silence. Not the silence of avoidance, not the silence of fear, but the kind of silence that comes from knowing your energy is too sacred to waste. Every reaction is a withdrawal. Every over-explained boundary, every defensive reply, every argument to prove your point. It all costs you. And you don't owe anyone that cost, especially not people who aren't willing to meet you with the same emotional currency. There is a rare strength in staying quiet, in choosing to say nothing when your nervous system is screaming to be understood. Because that silence, that pause, it's where your power lives. It's the space between the trigger and the reaction. And in that space, everything shifts. You are no longer participating in the game. You are observing it. And in that observation, you reclaim the most powerful thing you've ever had: choice. The world has taught you that power is loud, that it's about dominating, correcting, reacting. But real power is presence. It's knowing you can respond and choosing not to. It's not indifference, it's discernment. You begin to understand that not every message needs a reply, not every attack needs a defense, not every slight is worth your peace. Some things are better left unanswered, not because you're weak, but because you've grown, and you no longer exchange your energy for validation. You no longer pay emotional rent to people who live in dysfunction. You walk away not because you're afraid of confrontation, but because you're unwilling to sacrifice your vibration for a moment of ego. That's emotional maturity. That's sovereignty. And it changes everything. Because the moment you realize silence is a form of communication, a form of command, you start using it as your strategy. You pull back, you pause, you protect. And people feel it. They feel the shift. They feel your absence more than they ever appreciated your presence. And some will be confused. Some will get angry. Some will try to provoke you back into the old pattern. Don't fall for it. That's the test. When you stay silent in the storm, when you keep your center, you break the loop. And in breaking the loop, you create a new signal. I am no longer available for my own depletion. I am no longer accessible through guilt. I do not need to perform, explain, or react to prove I exist. I know who I am, and I choose stillness. You start to look around and realize not everyone around you is meant to stay. Some people entered your life because of who you were when you didn't know how to protect your energy. Back when you mistook being agreeable for being kind. Back when you thought being liked was the same as being valued. And when you begin to change, when you start reclaiming your time, your space, your boundaries, people who were comfortable with the version of you that had no limits will begin to fall away. That's not rejection. That's alignment. You're not losing people. You're shedding energetic contracts that were built on your self-abandonment. You start to notice the weight certain conversations leave behind, the way your stomach tightens before answering certain messages, the way your energy dips after being around someone who always has a new crisis, a new complaint, a new reason why your attention should be directed at them instead of your own life. These aren't coincidences. They're clues. So you begin the audit. You stop asking who likes you and start asking who lifts you, who nourishes you, who respects the silence between responses, who doesn't require you to overperform just to maintain connection. You realize your energy is not just sacred, it's selective. Not everyone deserves a seat at your emotional table. Some people don't bring a contribution, they bring a hole, a drain, an energetic vacuum that always needs filling, fixing, managing. And if you've ever left a conversation more tired than when it began, you already know what I'm talking about. This audit isn't cruel, it's clarity. You're not judging anyone, you're discerning. You're learning the difference between emotional intimacy and emotional invasion, between support and surveillance, between those who check in because they love you and those who check in because they want continued access. You'll feel it when you pull away. The ones who respect your energy will give you space. The ones who are using it will demand explanations. Watch who gets uncomfortable when you stop being easy, when you stop over-explaining, when you stop giving more than you receive. Their discomfort isn't a reflection of your boundaries being wrong, it's a reflection of how much they benefited from your lack of them. And this is when the guilt creeps in, the programmed voice in your head that says, "But they've been in my life so long," or "Maybe I'm being selfish," or "What if they think I'm cold?" That voice was trained by years of overextending yourself to stay safe, to stay loved. But here's what you need to know. You do not owe lifelong access to people who only showed up for the over-giving version of you. Connection without mutual nourishment is a contract of slow, spiritual decay. It feels like companionship, but it's just erosion with a smile. Audit your circle, not with judgment, with self-respect. Because peace isn't found in being surrounded, it's found in being supported. And support doesn't require performance, it requires presence. And once you begin vibrating at this new frequency, where your energy is guarded, intentional, rooted in truth, everything starts to shift. It's not just the people who change, it's the way life meets you. Because energy doesn't lie. You start noticing how certain rooms feel heavier, how some opportunities feel off, no matter how good they look on paper. You begin to understand that energy is a language, and your body, your intuition, is fluent in it. The people who once felt magnetic start to repel, not because they're bad, but because your vibration no longer matches the chaos they bring. You're not better than them. You're just not tuned to the same channel anymore. You've raised your frequency, and not everyone is supposed to come with you. This frequency shift is subtle, but powerful. You're no longer drawn to gossip, chaos, constant stimulation. You start craving stillness, clarity, realness. You become bored by the things that used to hook your attention. The drama, the proving, the pleasing. You stop being accessible to every request, every favor, every call that comes with urgency, but no reciprocity. You begin to see that urgency is often manipulation in disguise. That people who constantly demand access are not seeking connection, they're seeking control. And you refuse to be controlled, not anymore. You stop over-explaining your absence. You stop apologizing for your silence. You let people wonder, and in that wondering, they meet a version of you that no longer negotiates your peace to make them comfortable. The frequency shift also changes what you attract, because you're no longer broadcasting from a place of desperation, obligation, or lack. You're broadcasting from alignment, from presence, and that signal pulls in what matches. People who are whole within themselves, not looking to borrow your stability to compensate for their own imbalance. The connections that form now don't come with emotional labor as a price tag. They come with respect, mutuality, ease. And if something doesn't feel like ease, you trust that feeling. You no longer override your intuition to maintain appearances. You no longer ignore your gut to avoid conflict. Because now you know, Anything that costs you your peace is too expensive. No matter how familiar, no matter how long they've known you, no matter how good their intentions. You're no longer a tuning fork for other people's chaos. You're no longer a battery they can run to when they're low and leave when they're charged. You are no longer available for the version of your life that required you to be exhausted to feel worthy. The frequency shift means you are now vibrating at the level of self-respect, clarity, and discernment. And not everyone can handle that. Let them go. Let the signals sort the noise. What aligns will stay, what drains will fall away. This is how you reclaim your energy, not just by saying no, but by embodying a frequency that no longer resonates with depletion. That's not a phase. That's evolution. At some point, you reach a breaking moment, or maybe it's better to call it a becoming moment, where you can no longer keep giving out pieces of yourself to keep other people whole. You feel it in your body first. The sigh before you answer the phone. The tension in your chest before you say yes again. The exhaustion that doesn't go away with sleep. It's your soul trying to get your attention. Whispering, then begging, stop. And it's in this space that you begin to understand something radical. Something that almost feels taboo in a world obsessed with productivity and people-pleasing. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It is sacred. There is a kind of selfishness that saves you. A sacred selfishness. One that says, I choose me. I choose rest over performance. I choose silence over explanation. I choose to disappoint others if it means I stop betraying myself. This sacred selfishness is not the loud, aggressive kind. It's not about cutting everyone off or burning bridges just to prove a point. It's quiet. It's intentional. It looks like cancelling plans and not feeling guilty. It looks like letting the phone ring and not needing to explain why. It looks like saying, I don't have the energy for this right now, and being okay if someone doesn't like it. You begin to honor your energy as a living thing, one that needs space, stillness, protection. Not everyone will understand. That's fine. Understanding isn't a prerequisite for your boundary to be valid. You are no longer living to be digestible. You are no longer contorting yourself into the most palatable version just to stay accepted. You are no longer measuring your worth by how much of yourself you can give away. That was survival. This is something else entirely. This is healing. This is the soft but undeniable revolution of saying, I will no longer be emotionally on call. And when you start living this way, rooted, clear, unapologetic, you will notice something powerful. Your presence becomes louder than your words ever were. You don't need to defend your choices. People can feel your boundary before you speak it. They can sense your no without you raising your voice. Sacred selfishness sharpens your intuition. It teaches you the power of being selective. Selective with your time, your space, your truth, your love. Because when you're always available, your presence is taken for granted. But when you choose to be intentional, when you no longer perform access as a form of identity, people learn to treat your energy with the reverence it deserves. Or they leave. And either outcome is peace. This is the quiet liberation of sacred selfishness, realizing you don't owe your exhaustion to anyone. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You were not born to be a balm for other people's chaos. You were born to live fully. And full living does not include emptying yourself daily just to maintain false harmony. Let them think you're selfish. Let them label you distant. You know the truth. You're coming home to yourself, and you're learning to stop asking for permission to rest there. And then it happens. Maybe not all at once, but gradually, unmistakably. A quiet power begins to return. Not the kind of power you have to force or chase or prove, a different kind. The kind that comes when you stop leaking energy into people, places, and patterns that only survive if you stay asleep to your own worth. You begin to feel centered, even when things around you are chaotic. You begin to trust silence more than small talk. You begin to feel like yourself again, maybe for the first time, and not the version of you shaped by obligation or survival or projection, but the real one. The one who existed before the world taught you to perform. That version is strong, clear, whole. And when you meet that version of yourself, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop begging to be understood. You stop watering dead plants. You stop explaining your number. You stop trying to convince people that your peace is worth preserving. You simply live in alignment. And that alignment speaks louder than anything you could ever say. From this place, your life begins to rebuild. Not from urgency, not from trauma, but from truth. You create space for what actually matches your frequency. The relationships that come next don't ask you to shrink. They don't require performance. They meet you in your stillness. They rise to your clarity. And those that don't, they fade. Not because you pushed them out, but because the version of you that kept them around no longer exists. This is what it means to reclaim your energy. Not just to say no to what depletes you, but to say yes to what honors you. Yes to slowness. Yes to solitude. Yes to the life that actually feels like yours. Because your soul is not here to be constantly poured out. Your soul is here to expand, to explore, to express. And you cannot do any of that if you are stuck in performance, in exhaustion, in overextension. You came here to live, fully, fiercely, freely. And that begins the moment you stop seeing your energy as something others are entitled to and start treating it as sacred ground, protected not by walls, but by unwavering self-respect. The moment you no longer need applause to feel valuable. The moment you stop confusing being needed with being loved. The moment you realize that being whole is more important than being liked. That's when everything shifts. That's when you stop surviving and start living.